Hey there, WordNerds! It is Wednesday and time for part 2 of my crash course on literary devices. So 6 weeks ago, when I did my last Wordplay Wednesday video, I talked about literary devices pertaining to your word choice and your sentence structure. Today we're going to get into the devices that have more to do with how you tell the story and the content of the story. These are my favorite kinds of literary devices, things like symbolism, allusions, allegories. These kinds of things are great because they add an extra depth to your story for the readers that are looking for it, but if you're just reading it simply on the surface for fun, then they aren't absolutely necessary to understanding the story. I think part of why I love these so much is because they add an extra depth to the story. For people like me who like to reread their favorite books over and over again, it's fun to find these little details. Like I said in part 1, this isn't necessarily something you need to sit down in your plotting process and think, oh, what is this necklace going to be a symbol of? But it's something to just keep in mind as you go. So today I'm going to talk about 5 common and pretty important literary devices, and to make it extra fun, I'm going to give you examples from one of my favorite books, which is The Hunger Games. First up is allusion. Allusion is when you reference something outside of your book in your book. So this could be a historical event, another book, a movie, a piece of music. Allusion can go all the way from the very obvious level of referencing the name of the book or a character, all the way to just paralleling an important event or an important character in that story. So at the end of The Hunger Games, the first book in the series, Katniss realizes that the only way for her and Peeta to both get out of the Hunger Games is if they fake a double suicide. Katniss and Peeta are often referred to as star-crossed lovers in the book, so this is a small, subtle allusion to Romeo and Juliet and their double suicide. This is a great example of how allusions aren't always necessary to understand. You could not know about Romeo and Juliet at all, if that's possible, and still be able to enjoy this scene in the book, but if you do know the story, then it adds an extra layer. Next up is motif. This is kind of like a theme. It's an object or an idea or an image that is repeated over and over again throughout the story. In The Hunger Games, a big motif throughout the whole series is fire. Katniss is called the girl on fire. She is burned in fires. People die in explosions. There's a lot of fire in this series. And of course, that represents the burning of the revolution and the spread of the revolution. Next up is imagery. It is exactly what it sounds like. You probably can guess what it means. Imagery is just the way that you describe things. Imagery is very, very important in your novel. It's actually one of the ones you want to think about the most because the imagery is part of what helps your readers get sucked into the story and enter that suspension of disbelief. When Suzanne Collins goes into all this detail describing the gruesomeness of the Hunger Games or the beauty of the Capitol's outfits, it really makes you feel like it is a real story in a real world. Next up is juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is putting two opposing or opposite things side by side for comparison. This helps your readers understand just how great or just how terrible something is. Think about it. If all we saw in the Hunger Games was the condition that District 12 lived in, we might not realize just how bad it is. We could assume that the whole world is like that and it's just the status quo. But when the conditions in District 12 are juxtaposed with the opulence of the Capitol, it really helps you understand just how terrible of conditions the Capitol is putting the districts under. And my last literary device for you is foreshadowing. It's one of my favorites. Foreshadowing is really important if you maybe have a surprise that you're going to throw at the readers later. I always say that big twists in your story should be surprising, but should not be completely confusing or out of the blue. When you have little clues like foreshadowing earlier in the book, it helps the big twist make sense later on. I love being able to go back and reread the book and notice all the little clues and hints that I was given. I really like how Suzanne Collins does her foreshadowing because it's not so completely obvious. Instead of saying, maybe Prim could get chosen and Katniss is really worried about that, Katniss thinks about how Prim is very unlikely to get chosen and Katniss is the one likely to get chosen for the Hunger Games. And as early as the beginning of the first book, we are told that the victors are the only people who are safe from the Hunger Games. This is a really important foreshadowing to the fact that the victors actually won't be safe in the second book. And that is it for today. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite literary devices are, or if you've seen some of these in your favorite books. And don't forget that our live chat is this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time. I'll see you then.